Truthiness, a noun. The quality of seeming or being felt to be true, even if not necessarily true. Now, if you're not familiar with the word truthiness, don't worry because it's kind of a new word. Yes, truthiness is found in the dictionary. Not that any of us have any paper dictionaries around, but you can look on dictionary.com and find the word truthiness. And this word truthiness hit the world by storm in 2005. Wow, now that I say that out loud, this isn't such a new word because most of you probably weren't even born yet. But when this word arrived in 2005, it actually became the word of the year. That's how popular it was. That's how much it hit the world by storm. And it basically means that people can believe something even though there's no reason to believe it. There's no logic behind it. There's no reasonable explanation. They just believe it because, well, they believe it. It's their truthiness. Well, that kind of sounds like Christianity. I mean, don't Christians just believe because they feel it? There's no reason behind it because there's no thing to look at, right? There's no evidence, no logic, no intellectual examination. Wrong. But this is why we're doing this series, is because being a Christian encapsulates all of those things. I mean, if you want to be a Christian, those things should actually strengthen your faith and not be, adversaries to each other. But truthiness does encapsulate something that we talked about last week, relativism. This you do you mentality. You can do whatever you want just as long as it's not hurting anybody. That there aren't things in the world that are absolutely wrong or absolutely right. There aren't things that you shouldn't do, like no one should do, and there aren't things that you should do, like everyone should do. That when we look out in the world, there aren't those absolute wrong things that, even if everyone did them, they're still wrong. And there's not those things that are absolutely right, that if no one did them, they wouldn't be right. That morality or ethics or religion, those things are just kind of what you make it. If it works for you, well then that's great, but it doesn't have to work for everybody. You have your way, and I have my way, but for the right way, or the correct way, or the only way, well that's something that doesn't exist. And those are the words of a French philosopher, Friedrich Nietzsche, just so you know. But in other words, it really asks the question, who determines truth? Who determines right or wrong? And the answer is, well, we do. Well, whoever we is. That truth becomes relative to the person or society or culture or, the group that you're in. That we simply just do our own thing, whatever fits our lifestyle. And according to Barna, this group performs hundreds and thousands of interviews per year to give people a good idea of where everyone falls kind of culturally or ethnically or religiously. And what they found is that 9 out of 10 Christian students fall under this idea of moral relativism, that you do you, boo, and as long as it's not hurting anybody, it's fine. And so if there's 9 out of 10 Christian students who believe this, who affirm this, who hold on to this, who live their lives like this, I mean, check yourself for a second. Do you fall in this category of being a moral relativist where morals and ethics and religion are just kind of up to you to make what's right and what's wrong? If the data is correct, the chances are you do to some extent. Again, in 2005, they did another survey with teens, and they found that 1/3 of all teens, they have this idea that there's not one true real religion. And the Christians weren't any better at this survey. When they surveyed Christian teens or teens who called themselves Christians, they found that only 46% believed that there's only one true religion. And I kind of get it because, wouldn't it be nice to live in a world that you do you and I'll do me as long as we're not hurting anybody and everything's kind of open and what works for you? Well, if that works for you, that's great. This is what works for me. Why can't we all just kind of get along? I mean, isn't it all the same God just under a different name? I mean, who am I to really judge, right? I mean, if it really does work for them, whatever. I mean, that all seems great, right? Right, it all seems great until someone disagrees with you or until someone hurts you, and it's their belief that that's right, but it hurts you and it's wrong to you. So then what do you do then? I mean, if we live in this world where it's like you do you, boo, and that's the mentality that we all have, what do we actually do when someone does something wrong? Can we actually say that that's wrong? Or when someone hurts you or somebody can we actually say, you need to stop because even though you think that's right, that's something that's actually wrong. And not just because I say it, but it's just wrong in general. No one should be treated that way. No one should do that to another person. Listen, I know I've jumped off into this deep deep thing of ideas, and I know that not everyone thinks this way, but the data and my experience with just people and students all lead me to believe that we're swimming in a pool of moral relativism. This idea that you do you, boo, and as long as you're not hurting anybody, then we're okay. But I want to warn you that this mentality of moral relativism is a dangerous one. And this is why truth is so important. And when I say truth, I don't mean truthiness. I mean actual rights and actual wrongs and actual, real things out there. Not just opinions. I'm talking about objective things and subjective things. Objective things meaning things that pertain to fact and fiction, right and wrong. Truths about a certain object that's not dependent on someone's opinion or someone's viewing it. It just is. And subjective truth claims are those things that are opinion, that there is no real right or wrong answer. That the truth claim being made is true for the subject making it, but it's not necessarily true for everyone around them. Subjective truth claims are relative to the people. And when you think about subjective and objective truth claims, you can think about it as like ice cream and insulin. Ice cream being the subjective part and insulin being the objective part. Listen, if you said to me that chocolate chip ice cream was the best ice cream in the world, it'd be really weird for me to say, like, did you just say chocolate chip? Oh my, you are going to hell. And why would that be weird? It would be weird because it's just a preference. It's just an opinion on something that there is no real right or wrong on. And plus, we all know that Reese's Pieces ice cream is the best ice cream ever. But if I were to say that insulin is a medicine for diabetes, well, now we're not talking about just opinion anymore. We're actually talking about something that actually works, that actually is. And if you didn't believe me, we could actually go to a doctor and test this out a little bit. I mean, think about this for a second. If you go to the doctor and the doctor diagnoses you with diabetes, he's not going to ask you, hey, so what's your preference on this? Like, how do you want to be treated? Do you want, like, I don't know, what do you like? That's just not how it works. The doctor's going to prescribe you something that actually works. And you're going to want something that works. You're not going to want just your opinion or what makes you feel good. You're going to want something that actually makes you better. That makes you better regardless of your preference, regardless of how much you want ice cream to be true. You're going to want the right medicine. You're going to want some insulin. And here's the thing about objective truth claims. Here's the thing about insulin. That even if you thought ice cream was the cure, you could test it. And if you were to test it, you would see that it would obviously come back false. And that's the other thing about subjective and objective truth claims. Subjective truth claims, you can't really prove because there is no right or wrong. But with objective truth claims, you can put those things to the test. And that's one of the crazy things or the tricky things about objective truth claims is that, they don't necessarily have to be true, but you're making a truth claim about an object, which can be either true or false. And the way you prove that is by actually testing it, by seeing it, by feeling it, by putting it under a microscope, by really saying, is what you just said about that one object true? For example, this is a stuffed animal of the pig from Moana. I think his name is Pua or something like that. I just made an objective truth claim, but if you know anything about that stuffed animal, it would be false because that animal is Bolt. He's the stuffed animal from the movie Bolt. I was making a claim about the object, but the claim that I was making was false. And the way we knew it was false is because, you could go and watch the movie Moana and see, was that a pig? Was that the pig in the movie? No. And if you've ever seen Bolt, you would obviously be like, that's not a pig, that's a dog. And it's from the movie Bolt because I've seen the movie Bolt. I can test all these things. I can see them. I can prove them. I can show you some evidence behind them. But let me give you another example. Let me bring Bolt back into the picture. Bolt, he's back. Now, looking at this stuffed animal, and if I told you, man, the reason I got this stuffed animal is because Bolt is literally the best movie Disney ever made. Well, some of you would look at me and disagree, and some of you would be like, okay, I can see your point, but there wouldn't really be any wrong or right answer. It's just my preference, because you might have a favorite movie, but I might disagree with you. I might hate that movie. I don't know, for what, even the storyline or the characters, or maybe it stars cats instead of dogs. But those are subjective truth claims. Those are just opinions and preferences. And, it's true for me, but not for you because it has to deal with the subject. I'm the subject in this instance. And it's really important that we understand the difference between subjective truth claims and objective truth claims. Again, subjective truth claims are opinion and preference. They deal with the person saying the truth claims. And objective truth claims are, outside of preference, outside of opinion. They deal with fact and fiction and real and non-real and truth and false and all those things that can be tested, things that are true about an object and not just true for the subject. Again, just think of ice cream. That's subjective, and insulin is objective because it's doctor. You want what works. So here's a little test because it's super important that we understand this. I'm going to give you a few questions to see how well you do, whether, you can determine whether it's subjective or objective. Question number 1. My shirt is black. What do you think? Objective. Objectively false. My shirt is not black. I don't know what color it is really. It's like a tannish white with speckles. Next question. Red is the most beautiful color ever. Subjective. You might not agree with me, but I might say that red is the most beautiful color ever for whatever reason. Next one. 2 plus 2 is 4. That would be objective because I don't know if some crazy math teachers could twist it or whatever, but 2 plus 2 equals 4. I don't know if I did that right. 4. Next one. Summer is the best time of year. That is objectively false because winter is the best. Just kidding. It's subjective. Subjective. Some people love summer. I personally don't love summer. So that's, we differ there. But it's subjective, based on the subject. Next one. Primary colors are red, blue, and yellow. Objective. That's actually true. Primary colors are red, blue, and yellow. You can't really mix any colors to get those colors, so that's why they're primary. I can bench 300 pounds. That is objectively false. I can't bench 300 pounds, but it's not just my opinion. I was making an objective claim about me, and if we were to go to a gym, I could prove you that I can't do it. It's too heavy for me. I could probably just do the bar. Okay, next question. Subjective or objective? Ready? God exists. You might believe that. Do others believe that? Next question. Sex before marriage is wrong. What do you think? Subjective or objective? I know some of you believe that, but again, how many people don't believe that? Moving on, next question. Abortion is wrong. Subjective or objective? Again, a lot of people believe it. A lot of people believe that it's not. What do you think? Now, for about the first 6 questions, they were pretty easy because they were cut and clear. You could see like, oh yeah, that's an opinion or that's, fact. You can prove those things. But then for the last few, it got a little tougher, didn't it? It was harder to distinguish, is that opinion? Because I believe that, but I know other people don't believe that. And I know I have convictions about this, but maybe other people don't have convictions about that. So does that make it subjective? I don't know. And just so you know, the last few were objective claims. Again, this is more than just your opinion. You're stating something about an object out there. And those things that you're making, those claims that you're making about an object, those can be proven true or false. And we'll get into those reasons later, but just know that those are objective truth claims. You're not just making a feely type of claim. You're saying, no, this is true for everybody, whether you believe it or not. Again, it's so important that you think about these things, that you think about objective truth claims and subjective truth claims. And this is the reason why, because your ideas have consequences. What you believe about the real world will be played out in the real world. What you believe about God and sex and marriage and all those other things, what you believe to be right or what you believe to be wrong, will be practiced in your everyday life. Your ideas have consequences. The truth matters. I mean, if you really believe that sex before marriage is just a preference, then what's to stop you from changing your preference 5 minutes from now? a month from now, a year from now, when it really counts? Like, what's stopping you from saying, I don't believe this conviction anymore because it's just an opinion, it's just a preference? And so you have to think about the other side, is like, what if sex just isn't an opinion? What if premarital sex wasn't just a preference, but sex was designed for a purpose and for an occasion and a specific context? And understanding that context and understanding that purpose would actually save you and other people from a lot of hurt. Wouldn't that make a difference in your life to know whether that's an opinion or something that's not opinion, that is actual real stuff out there, that premarital sex is a bad thing? I don't know, maybe I sound crazy, maybe I am crazy, but to me that seems like a big deal. I don't want to be hurt. I don't want to hurt others. I want to save myself from those things. But the more we adopt moral relativism, the more we adopt this idea that everything goes, the more that we see that, well, if everything's allowed, then nothing is ultimately unallowed. The idea of sin or wronging your neighbor or doing right for a stranger, those all become a matter of taste. If you don't like it, then you don't have to do it. And if you don't want to do it, then don't do it. I mean, who's going to look at you and say that that's bad? It's just your preference. And at that point, God and Jesus mean absolutely nothing, because you've become your own God to decide what's right and what's wrong, what's real and what's not real. And you don't really need Jesus, because there are no wrongs to be made right. And if you're a youth leader or a parent or an aunt or a grandma or an uncle or someone who knows a student, know that they're probably experiencing some of the effects of moral relativism in their life right now. You might even be experiencing some of this. Because when we think of commitment and duty and responsibility, obedience or calling or obligation, or even accountability, there's some disconnect in, most American teens. And the reason is because those things only make sense if there are moral objective rules out there. I mean, if there aren't any moral objective rules, then you have no obligation, you have no responsibility, you have no calling to do the right thing. It's just do whatever you want. And here's a little test for you, just a mind experiment for you to experiment with. Think of 7 things that make a Christian. Think of 7 things that you would write down to say, this is what a Christian believes, or this is what a Christian does. I'm guessing in those 7 things you might have said, have a relationship with Jesus, or, follow God, or something like that, which are all great things. But I can probably guarantee you that there are a few key things missing from that list. Things that we don't think about because moral relativism has kind of snuck into, our wiring, our culture, our brains, just the way we think about how the world works around us. And some of those things are like, being a Christian means you turn away from your sins, that there was a price to pay for those sins, that being a Christian means now that you are free from God's wrath, his anger. And all of those things are kind of key points into the gospel message. Like, you should have those in your heart somewhere so that you realize how bad you were, but how good God was. And again, we're using good and bad, and if it's you who define those things, you might make yourself not to be that bad. And if you're not that bad, then God's really not that good. But understanding all of those things gives you a better perspective of how much you are actually loved, the price that he had to pay, how much it cost him, how much you were saved from his wrath. And to understand those, you really have to say, there are certain things that I do wrong, that I need saving from, that I need to be made right. And relativism, this you do you boo mentality, is a slow and dangerous road to some dangerous places. I mean, moral relativism kills moral judgment. Moral relativism kills moral judgment. And I kind of talked about this earlier with the sex thing. If you don't think sex is that big of a deal and it's just a matter of opinion, well then your moral judgment is just kind of out the window, because you'll change whatever moral or ethical thing at the flip of a hat when it's convenient for you. There's no real convictions anymore. It's just preference, opinion, when you're ready. But relativism also minimizes religion. It makes it irrelevant. And what tends to happen is that we push the religion, we push Jesus to be this private thing that we do on our own, if we do it at all. You know, when we go out into the public, we say, okay, well, I'm going to leave Jesus and this religion stuff at the door. I think this is one of the reasons why you can look at your Twitter or your Instagram or your Snapchat or your Facebook or whatever social media you have, and it looks completely different than your church life. You know, in those little bios, you might say Christian living, but then you go down to those comments and you go down to your posts, and they look anything but Christian living. This is why I have tons of students who say, oh, I can't show you my playlist. Oh, I can't show you those pictures. Ooh, let me screen my phone before you go through these photos. It's because we've compartmentalized all those things and we've said, listen, God is for this little area, but when I go out, I'm going to look like everyone else because that's just what people do. Jesus has really only become a part of their lives, a part that they leave at home. Relativism really breaks down our moral and religious convictions. Again, our ideas have consequences. And the crazy thing about it is that we operate like there are objective moral truths, like there are objective truths out there in general. We just can't help but live our lives that way. So I really think the question comes down to this, is that there are objective truths out there. We just have to know which objective truths are true, which ones are false. And the reason I know that we live like there are objective moral truths or there are objective truths out there is because of this. When we walk across the road, we look both ways, don't we? It's why when we see a truck coming down the road that we stop to see how fast they're going. We stop to see where if they're turning or going straight or if they're slowing down. We kind of look at all those things because we believe in objective truths. And if we don't believe in objective truths, then we wouldn't slow down. If we heard someone say, hey, there's a truck coming, and we say, oh, that's just your opinion, we could walk down the middle of the street and reality would hit us. The objective truth would smack us in the face. We'd be hit by a truck because it wasn't just an opinion, but it was actually something that was happening. Again, your ideas have consequences. If you think a truck is coming just someone's opinion, well, that has a consequence to it. And when it comes to God and Jesus and religion, your ideas have similar consequences. It's life and death. Because the claims about God, religion, and Jesus, those just aren't claims about which ice cream is the best. It's really asking the question of which medicine works. And when you look at your life, you're going to want the right medicine. You're going to want the thing that works. You're going to want to know if you have an illness that needs to be treated. And when I think we look at Christianity, I think this gives the best idea of what reality actually looks like, what our world actually is. That there's a sickness out there that needs a curing, that we have something inside of us that's not just bad things and good things, but it's something way deeper. There's a soul issue there. And with that soul issue, Jesus is the only one who cures that issue. Again, this is an objective claim, but it can be objectively true or objectively false. We just have to distinguish which one is it. So again, truth matters. Your ideas have consequences. And I really urge you guys to think about this. If you are a parent or a youth leader or a grandma, grandpa, if you know a student, please invest in them and show them what real truth is, what false things and true things are, how to live a life, why it's important. And just don't point to the Bible, but just say, like, listen, you got to think about these things in context of what's the best life that you could be living. And the last thing I want to leave you with is don't bet on an ice cream when you should be betting on a medicine. Again, it would be the worst thing to say, like God and religion and Jesus, those things are just subjective. If it's true for you, well, then that's great, but it's not true for me. When in actuality, those things were objective. Those things were medicine. So again, your ideas have consequences. Don't bet on an ice cream when you should be betting on a medicine. Thanks again, guys, and be blessed. Bye.